and Back Classic NBA podcast. I am Jason, and with me as usual is Rich. Hello, Rich.
I'm very excited about this very original, very topic thing that we have never, ever, you and I have ever discussed before. I cannot wait to discuss the best players on worst teams ever, Jason, with you for the first time, of course.
For the first time.
Why I had to preface that, I don't know. I mean, obviously, every show we do is the first time we talked about that topic. Just for some reason, it felt good to be able to talk to you about this particular topic for the one and only time that we're ever going to talk about this particular topic, of course. So.
Of course, yeah. I mean, there's no chance that we may have had a conversation about this already that somehow accidentally didn't get recorded.
Yeah, that's like deja vu. You know, deja vu is I often have that. You know, there's
Sure.
some, you know, people will say, oh, deja vu is this, or it's your brain doing this or whatever. So that might be what you're going through right now, I guess. I mean, this is clearly, to me, the only time I've ever talked to you about this topic. So I don't know what's going on with you. I guess maybe you should Google some dream, thoughts that, deja vu or study your dreams a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of wild that you feel like we've talked about this before, because we definitely, I don't know, Jason, we definitely have not. So that's kind of weird.
Right. Well, speaking of making the best of a bad situation by trying again for this, the focus of our show today is the best NBA players on the worst teams. So we're going to approach this a couple different ways. One, we have some statistical thresholds that we just sort of picked to look at, and we'll get to a couple here in just a moment. Like, for example, players that average 30 points per game for teams that won less than 30 games in a season. Fairly rare circumstance to happen. So we're, going to kind of dig into that. And then we're also going to look at the 10 worst performing teams over a season and try to pick which player from each of those teams was the best performer. So it should be a fun one to do.
Absolutely, yeah. And the real inspiration of this is unfortunately Bradley Beal, who is continually going on. And we'll touch on him here in a little bit in this first part. But he is our inspiration just because of how bad the Wizards are, and how bad it appears they're going to be, and how great he is as well. Not just this year in a year where offensive has exploded, but also last year as well, where he stood out on a pretty bad team, and it looks like he, at least for now, as of this recording, is in for the long haul. For the Wizards. I don't know. By the end of this year, he might be thinking, you know what? Maybe not so much. But I guess in some ways it's kind of cool that he's down for being great on a bad team, and we'll talk about some players here who maybe were both down and also not down with being on really bad teams as well. But he is our inspiration here. Bradley Beal, unfortunately, is a great player on a particularly bad team right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we'll start off, as we talked about, looking at players with 30 points per game for teams with less than 30 wins. So we begin, as we always like to begin, with the 1960 Cincinnati Royals.
Mm-hmm. Not a podcast goes by that we don't start off talking about the 1960 Cincinnati Royals, of course.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a team with some, we have Jack Twyman, obviously, leading the team in scoring 31.2 names, and, illustrious names like, Bucky Bockhorn, Win Wilfong. With Win Wilfong, you think they would have won more games, but, apparently he didn't quite live up to his name. Hub Reed, Med Park, Jim Palmer, probably not the same as the Baltimore Orioles pitcher, I'm guessing, but
we don't know that. I without looking it up, I cannot confirm it. I think it would be pretty difficult for him to be a NBA player and then 15 years after this go in and pitch and win 20 games in the majors. But maybe. I mean,
possible. Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's it takes all kinds. Which of course we do have Hall of Famer Wayne Embry here. Definitely a great big man on the early part of his career. Also, great executive for the Bucks and the Cavs later. They were 1956. This was their third year in Cincinnati. They'd been absolutely terrible the last two seasons, but better times were going to be ahead because they were about to get Oscar Robertson, and they, for the most part, be pretty good for the rest of the 60s. So never could get past those Celtics, but. Yes, and then also with the early 60s, a couple teams from 1962. First, we have Walt Bellamy, 1962 Packers, 18-62. This was an expansion team. Pretty much all expansion teams are terrible, and this was really the first expansion team since the NBA sort of has finally sort of established itself with its core 8 teams in the middle of the 50s, all the teams that, kind of weeded themselves out from the merger years. This is the first time they ever expanded. And it lasted 2 years in Chicago. And we're like, Chicago, not related to the NBA. We're going to go to Baltimore instead.
Yeah, Chicago constant, through the NBL, the BAA, any pro league always said, Chicago, we got to do, and it just never worked. And then, obviously the Bulls come later, many years after the Packers, and it doesn't initially feel like it's going to work there either, which, now seems so ridiculous given, what a big market Chicago is for the NBA. But yeah, it failed miserably time and time again. And Chicago Packers, one of many teams that in the lineup of just dead Chicago basketball franchises.
Yeah, they got 15 games out of Barney Cable and still couldn't be more successful.
Right.
I don't know.
I've always asked my dad, because my dad was alive during this time, and I'm always saying, hey, did you go to any Chicago Packers games? And he's like, God, no, I didn't go. And Barney Packer was there. Like, you sure? Like, why did you not go see that? And he didn't, and that's why it just didn't work in Chicago. Is it despite having legends and stars like Barney Packer, they just couldn't get in the community. They couldn't get the community to drive over to insert stadium. I forget where they played. I don't know if they played in the auditorium or the Chicago Stadium, but just didn't work. So
no, Barney. They played at the International Amphitheater. I'm sorry to correct you, but Barney Cable. Not Barney.
Okay. Well, whatever.
Yeah.
Either way,
Barney Packers, completely different thing. Yeah, the legend. I like to call him the king of cable, personally.
Yes.
So, yes.
Right.
So.
My dad lived he legitimately lived 6 minutes away from the amphitheater. So I don't know what the hell he was doing here. Maybe he did. Maybe I need to revisit the discussion about the Chicago Packers with my dad. But
right.
I don't know.
So also the 1962 Hawks were 29-51. Bob Pettit, 30 plus points per game, even coached the team for 6 games during that season. Yeah, this is a sort of a weird one because the Hawks, they'd made the finals for the past 5 seasons, but they were 29-51 this season. And, some of the guys were getting older, like, Cliff Hagan was 30, Clyde Levalette was pretty much at the end. He was 32, but, Lenny Wiggins was young. Lenny Wilkins, not Lenny Wiggins. We're having trouble with last names, apparently. On this
we
show.
are. Yeah, we're struggling.
And Pettit's he's 29, but he's still going strong. Obviously, 31 points per game, 18.7 rebounds per game. So they'd be fine the next season. They'd be 50 plus wins for most of the rest of the decade. So it was kind of a weird anomaly the 62 season.
Yeah, it is strange because you look at the Hawks, and obviously they were a real one of the model franchises of the late 50s, successful team. And then there's this one little blip in the radar here where their defense, you could especially see it in their defense when you look at the numbers, is they were a really, really good defensive team for many, many years. And then for some reason in 1962 they just decided, defense, who needs it? Right. And it did terrible. And then they went back the next year and they were good again, and their defense was good again with pretty much the same roster. So I don't know what got in the water there in 1962, but they were just bad on defense. And it's not like they were just we regressed to 500. They were 29-51. They were really bad, but I don't know why.
Well, they only got 20 games out of Lenny Wilkins, so I'm guessing injuries or maybe he had military service commitments. I'm not sure there. They had 21 guys on the roster, including Barney Cable. Also played for both the Packers and the Hawks, man. Yeah,
he had a rough year, man. That's a lot of losses for old Barney there. Well, that could explain why my dad didn't remember Barney Cable. He was probably not on the team then when he went to the Packers game. So
yeah, he's not driving all the way down to the Kiel Auditorium to go see the St. Louis Sox.
No, certainly not.
Disappointing. Oh, okay. Not really dedicated to the early 60s NBA. Unfortunately, your dad. But it's whatever. Next we have Adrian Dantley for the 1982 Jazz, who were 25-57. And, the Jazz, they've obviously just moved to Utah a couple years before this, completely rebuilt the squad. And at this point, they had some guys who were actually fairly talented. You get Dantley, obviously, pretty much always going to be averaging 30 points per game during this time. Ricky Green, Daryl Griffith. So, pretty good nucleus of guys, but they were a little bit of ways away. Another 2 or 3 years, they were going to be making the playoffs and kind of perennially be, a borderline playoff team or, in the playoffs. And of course, transitioning into the Stockton Malone era. But this was the year they started off with Tom Nasalki. 20 games in, they go to Frank Layton. Actually, they were 8-12 under Nasalki, and then they were 17-45 under Layton. So not a great start to the Layton era there, but Dantley had a tendency in his career to performed really well statistically for teams that were fairly weak. Obviously bounced around a lot in the early days, but did, spent 7 years in Utah before, going to the Pistons and then, having the team success there, although ultimately getting traded before they were finally able to win the championship. But yeah, if you look between 82 and 85, Dantley averaged 30.7, 30.3, 30.7, and 30.6 points per game for each of those 4 seasons. So that is pretty remarkable consistency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then next, 1985 Knicks, we got Bernard King, 24 and 58 over the full season. This one comes with a bit of an asterisk because he only played 55 games. This was unfortunately the year where he suffered the horrific injury and kept him out of the league for a couple of years and basically ended his Knicks career. But they were 19 and 36 in games he played in, so not like a whole lot better. So they would have probably struggled to get to 30 wins. They might have gotten there, had he been able to play the whole season. But it was 1 year removed from them being in the Eastern Conference semifinals, taking the Celtics to 7 games. So I don't see a huge difference necessarily between. Well, I guess they didn't have Cartwright in 85 for some reason. He must have missed the whole year and some of the older guys like looking at now, Truck Robinson was gone. So maybe it was more like kind of the steady vets were gone, and then expecting Bernard King to carry a team when your second leading scorer is Pat Cummings. It's probably not going to take you too far.
Yeah. Not ideal, but it does stink though. I mean, the thing that hurts about this year is not necessarily that the Knicks and following up the success they had the year prior, but more Bernard King following up the success. I mean, this is when we're in the peak of Bernard King. He's becoming the king of New York. He's becoming this kind of transcendent star, and it's just kind of cut out from him, right here. And he's just so good this year. And he's kind of one of those what ifs too that you wonder, man, how different is everything in New York and how does that franchise go if Bernard King is healthy? Like, I guess the big question would be, do they draft pick wise and different. Yeah, it's just it's kind of crazy to think of had he just stayed good or not gotten hurt. What the Knicks would have been throughout the rest of the 80s and potentially into the 90s as well, and how different things may have been for them, whether for the better or for the worse. I don't know exactly. It just stinks when a guy in his prime that's really just scoring that well and playing that well just gets he gets injured and it just cuts him out right from under him.
Right. I mean, obviously they lucked into, getting Patrick Ewing in the lottery.
What? Luck. Yeah. Right.
Lucked.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Lucked into, getting Patrick Ewing for the, in the lottery and then transitioning to that era fairly well. Yeah. It's sort of, they never really tried King and Ewing together. Maybe they felt like that wasn't going to work, or maybe they felt like King, was done, even though, obviously he had a pretty good, set of years with the Washington Bullets and lasted into the mid 90s, but nevertheless, definitely, obviously, ended that era and kind of on a sour note, both in terms of obviously the injury and also in terms of where the team stood at that point. But and then we have Bradley Beal, as we talked about earlier. The 2020 Wizards, finished 24 and 47. That would be about 28, 29 wins over a full season, obviously cut short with the pandemic. And your 2021 Wizards, as of this recording, 8 and 17, have a negative 703 SRS. Beal's averaging 33.1 points per game. When we first started taking notes for this, the Wizards were actually worse than they are now. So this is undercutting our premise a little bit. The Wizards have won 3 of 5. They've improved their SRS enough to no longer be one of the 50 worst teams over a full season. So maybe aren't going to be historically terrible like some of the teams we're going to be talking about here, but certainly, still on pace for a pretty bad season. And I think at one point the Wizards were had lost 10 straight games in a row where Beal had averaged 30-plus points, which is, I
think that was right around when we decided to have this idea for this this show. And what will be interesting to see, though, throughout the rest of the year with the Wizards is, and this is particularly, of like new bad teams, like modern era bad teams, is typically a lot of those teams will look not to improve, but look to say, okay, we're bad. There's no point in getting a little bit better. Let's just get a lot worse and get, make sure we get better draft picks or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see what the Wizards do. But if Beal is invested in the team and actually wants to stick around, it is a possibility that they maybe add at the trade deadline or add a different piece or continue to rally. But it does stand to reason that there's a potential that they still do worse throughout the rest of this year. But we'll see. I mean, I'm glad that we lit a fire under them by
we're threading this. Yeah.
Yeah. So exactly. You're welcome, Wizards fans, all 12 of you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah. You are welcome, indeed. So, yeah, and I think people were, they got Russell Westbrook, in the offseason. I think people were expecting them to kind of be like somewhere between like 7 and 10 seed. Like, not great, but not terrible. And so far, things have not gone well for them. But we'll see how it goes. So, I also wanted to note there were a couple players who I thought were going to make this list who didn't. The worst Allen Iverson team actually in the season in which he averaged more than 30 points per game was the 2006 Sixers, who won 38 games. And also Kobe Bryant, the year after Shaq left, the 2005 Lakers only won 34 games. And he only averaged that year 27.6 points per game. It was the next season that he scored 35 plus points per game. And at that point they averaged more than 42, or they had more than 42 wins that season. So that surprised me a little bit. I kind of was, I think, conflating those years in my head and thinking that Kobe was just gunning and, scoring crazy. And the team was like worse than they actually were.
Yeah, I was exactly the same. I was kind of surprised when I didn't see Kobe on the list. And I'm glad that you added him to this little note here, because I always thought that 2005 Lakers team, when they were just really, really bad, and the first kind of big post Shaq year, was just Kobe just being an unabashed gunner and just like going out there. But yeah, I mixed up the years where the year he was really an unabashed gunner, they did pretty well and they won a lot of games. So I did kind of lump these 2 years in together, and yeah, I was a bit surprised to see him not on this list. And same for Iverson too. Iverson felt like kind of the poster boy for certain times where he was having big gaudy numbers on not so good teams, but for the most part, the Iverson Sixers were pretty damn good in most of his era. So that's interesting to see, at least when he was given the ball and just kind of given free reign to be Allen Iverson.
Yeah, exactly. So talking another statistical threshold, and this is a little bit random and arbitrary, but whatever. 25 points per game, 5.5 rebounds per game, 5.5 assists per game. So just want to go through the players who have done this, and in all cases except for a couple successfully. Giannis Antetokounmpo has done it twice and is on pace to do it for a third time this season. Rick Barry did it twice. Larry Bird did it 4 times. Kobe Bryant did it 3 times. Luka Doncic has done it once and is on pace to do it again this season. Clyde Drexler did it 3 times. Kevin Durant, Julius Erving, James Harden did it 5 times. John Havlicek did it twice. LeBron James has done it 15 times and is on pace to do it again this season. 15 times. What did you think when you saw that?
That eye-popping. Yeah, because you think that threshold is like, yeah, that's a really good all-around player, and then you see some of the names, and it's like, yeah, that all makes sense, and that's all pretty good. But to see LeBron having it 15 times, when even Oscar Robertson, who feels like one of those like kind of unattainable, like, could do it all type of guys that filled the stat box, all that sort of stuff. He did it 9 times and like is regarded as like the best, guy that, all around, one of the best all around players of all time. And LeBron did it 15 times and I'm based to do it again this year. And probably for like, I don't know, 5 more years. I don't know. Like
maybe.
I don't know. We keep waiting. Like I've been an adult the entire LeBron run, and it's like I was a child when he started, and he's still going, and I'm old now, and I'm sore all the time, and he's still going. Yeah, it's just nuts.
He's amazing. He's one more year. He's going to tie Ric Flair, so that's obviously great for him.
By WWE's terrible math, not.
Well, I mean, okay, yeah, I mean. It doesn't count when it's in the Philippines.
Right. Different time for a different day, I guess.
Yeah.
Or
all right.
In various NWA promotions, I guess.
Sure. Fine. I guess. Fine. All right. All these guys have been all-time legends or probably are going to be all-time legends. Sort of the oddball here, Jimmy Jones in the ABA for the 1969 New Orleans Buccaneers. Jimmy, solid player, on some really good Utah teams, but, kind of a little bit unexpected there. Michael Jordan did it 5 times. George McGinnis did it once. Oscar Robertson, as you mentioned, 9 times. Dwayne Wade did it once. Jerry West did it 5 times. Russell Westbrook has done it 4 times. And Nikola Jokic is on pace to do so this season. So now we got all those players, and then there are 2 others who were on sub 30 win teams. One, Richie Guerin from the 1962 Knicks. We keep bringing up 1962 here. We keep
it's a very year of stats and losing, I guess.
Yeah, and unfortunately, Barney Cable not on the 1962 Knicks. Not a lot of talent in the 1962 Knicks. Pretty much, you got Richie Guerin, you got Willie Knowles, you got Johnny Green. And then, it's a bunch of guys who, ended up getting smashed by Wilt Chamberlain and giving up 100 points to Wilt Chamberlain, Darrell Imhoff, Cleveland Buckner, guys like that. So, not the Knicks, again, from the, basically the mid 50s up until the late 60s, pretty much always bad. Richie Guerin kind of being the, one shining, bright light for the team, during that era. Probably not a bad comparison to Bradley Beal, honestly, in terms of just like, he was always like a guy who scored a lot and, was pretty versatile, was an excellent player. But never just had much for supporting cast. Beal for the most part. John Wall obviously had some great seasons, but beyond that, have always kind of been, a middling team at best. I think Guerin kind of fits into that as well.
Certainly. Yeah, for sure.
And then, the other one, Tracy McGrady, who did it twice, including for the 21-win 2004 Magic. And this is kind of like an all-time, like, not that the Magic of the McGrady era were ever, like, terrific, but, they were always, like, kind of a solid team, kind of like a, 7th, 8th seed type team. Not a lot of talent around McGrady, especially with Grant Hill's injuries. But this team, having 21 wins, they start off 1-10 with Doc Rivers. Actually, improve a decent amount to, were they decent by Christmas? Because that's the Christmas Day game, the famous one between McGrady and LeBron. Then they fall off pretty much after that, and they're terrible. And this is a roster with just a whole lot of guys on it.
Yeah, there's dudes. There are tons of dudes on there. A bunch of names that you've heard of names that were guys like dudes that were played the NBA, played like some decent minutes in the NBA, played some decent time. It's a very, very strange team. It's very like like you said, the McGrady years, they weren't like a tremendous team. They weren't like a title contender, but they were like, a 40 to 45 win team, a perennial, playoff team, like McGrady in the peak of his powers. They add in a bunch of veterans around him. You got, like you said, like, you want to name dudes, you got Deshaun Stevenson, you got Juwan Howard, you got Tyronn Lue, Gordon Gierachek, a young Drew Gooden, Andrew DeClerc. You want some Andrew DeClerc? We got Andrew DeClerc for you, too.
We do.
So, you want Stephen Hunter? We got Stephen Hunter for you. You want 2 games of Pat Garrity? Well, we can give you 2 games of Pat Garrity as well. But it's so strange because, this is like McGrady's coming off like an all-time great year the year prior. This year starts and they just stink. They're just terrible. They just lose a ton of games. And then, like you said, they fire Doc after 11 games. They make a little bit of a run to at least be respectable, and then they're back on just crap, and they win 21 games. It's a very, very weird thing, and it's kind of that's the end of the McGrady era in Orlando. It just ends in the weirdest way possible after like years of slowly feeling like, all right, we're building up, and then it just turns into crap. It's a very, very weird year. Yeah.
And they end up bouncing back. Okay, they get Dwight Howard. They, they're pretty good again in a few years. But it was really, just kind of capped off a really promising, but never really got to fruition era. With Hill's injuries and McGrady being amazing, but just not really having much else of a supporting cast, unfortunately. So,
all right.
So, Rich, before we get to our next topic. We talk a lot about balls on the show. Basketball podcast, of course. Mm-hmm. We talk about air balls, jump balls, Lonzo ball, LaMelo ball, LeVar ball, our favorite.
Oh, of course. Love talking LeVar ball. Yeah.
Yeah. 1991 Clippers forward Cedric Ball.
Oh, yeah. Not an episode goes by where we don't mention 1991 Clippers forward Cedric Ball.
Absolutely. But there's one set of balls that we've never discussed.
Okay.
Until now. Testicles, Rich. I'm not afraid to say it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Working blue. Jason's working blue over here. Yeah, no, that's you're right. This is the first time we're going to talk about the testicles here because support for Over and Back is brought to you by Manscaped, the best in men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. They obsess over their technology developments to provide you the best tools for your grooming experience.
Yes, and Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. Their engineering team spent 18 months perfecting the greatest ball hair trimmer ever created, and they've just released the new and improved Lawnmower 3.0.
Oh, this thing. Third generation trimmer 3.0. That's why it's a third generation. Features a cutting-edge ceramic blade, reduces grooming accidents thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology pioneered by Manscaped. And when we tell you this is premium, we mean premium. The battery will last up to 90 minutes, so you can have a longer shave. Hopefully you don't need all 90 minutes in one sitting, but if you do, it will last the entire 90 minutes. Don't worry.
Absolutely. And the waterproof technology allows you to groom in the shower. Mm-hmm. And one of the coolest features, it's an LED light. It illuminates grooming areas for a closer and more precise trimming. So if you need that 90 minutes, you need to get it in there real deep. Absolutely, the LED light's going to do it. Also, they've upgraded to a 7,000 RPM motor with quiet stroke technology. And let's not forget about the charging stand, Rich.
No.
You can show your mower off loud and proud because this intelligently designed stand, it's a convenient charging dock powered by USB.
Yeah, that's pretty cool too. So if you got the dock that's powered by USB, you want to put it next to a laptop, you want to bring it to your work, you want to charge it in your car. There's many ways that you can charge your Lawnmower 3.0 from Manscaped. But if you were listening to us speak right now, we want you to experience Manscaped for yourself. Trim that junk of yours. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the promo code FANSIDED20 at manscaped.com. Once again, that's 20% off plus free shipping with the code FANSIDED20 at manscaped.com. One more time, 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the promo code FANSIDED20, and we promise you that your balls will thank you.
So speaking of precision, the 1993 Dallas Mavericks.
Yes, speaking of balls.
Yes.
Speaking of unkept balls, the 1993 Dallas Mavericks, 11-71, negative 14.68 SRS, the worst team by Basketball Reference's SRS in history. It's not even close either. They're almost a full point ahead or behind, however you want to classify it, of the 2012 Charlotte Bobcats. We'll mention in a little bit here, the Charlotte Bobcats, but the worst offensive rating and the worst defensive rating in the league. And they actually overperformed their expected win-loss percentage as well by winning one more game than they should have. So congratulations to the 93 Dallas Mavericks for overperforming their expected win-loss. They won back-to-back games only twice all year, and they went into the All-Star break at 4-45. Can you imagine? Having to sit down. Imagine being a season ticket holder to a team that's 4-45. The best player on this really, really pathetic team is Derek Harper, who we'll talk about Derek Harper in a bit. Stats here, 2.7 win shares, 18.2 points per game, 5.4 assists per game. Shot a very respectable, at that time, 39.3% from three-point land as well. And Harper, you're probably thinking, man, Derek Harper, he's a pretty good player, right? And yeah, you're right. He was a key part of the team that were regulars in the Western Conference Finals, or the Western Conference playoffs. They even made a Western Conference Finals berth as well in the 80s. But this is a very, very different Mavericks team. Sam Perkins no longer there. He's in L.A. Fat Lever continues to get hurt. He's kind of done. Brad Davis retires due to injuries. Rolando Blackman is traded the year prior. Roy Tarpley, who was kind of a big draft pick, hoping that the get the Mavericks back on track. He's banned from the NBA due to drug issues. So essentially, you're left with Derek Harper and a bunch of dudes, and they were not good. But Derek Harper, though, his individual stats, they held up pretty well into his 30s, but the team does crater, and obviously, no offense to Derek Harper, but it's like, yeah, when Derek Harper's far and away your best player, and he's, in his early to mid 30s, it's probably not going to go well, and it did not, obviously. And luckily for Harper, though, he would be traded to the Knicks the following season, and he would help that team come within a game of winning the 1994 NBA Finals, so congratulations to him. Other players worth mentioning on this pathetic team: Sean Rooks, 13.3 points per game, and also Jim Jackson, 16.3 points per game. Now, a big issue and a big reason why this team is probably as bad as they are is you're thinking, man, Jim Jackson, he was a pretty good player, pretty high draft pick. And you're right. The problem, though, he only plays in 28 games because him and the Mavericks have a contract impasse. Things don't really work out right away. They draft him, and he goes, you guys are terrible. I don't really want to come to this team. But they end up kind of coming to an agreement finally. And the team does close the season on a 7-14 run with two straight wins at the end of the year to finish at 11-72. So Jim Jackson clearly helping them a little bit there, but it is pretty fascinating that they go on that 7-14 run, two straight wins just to get to 11-71. I mean, this is an all-time bad team, and SRS kind of bears that out as well.
Yes, and yeah, it wouldn't get much better the next season with Jim Jackson and Joel Mashburn leading the way. And Derek Harper, unfortunately, had to endure quite a bit of that season before finally mercifully getting traded to the Knicks and getting to do something else. Fun fact, Jim Jackson is one of 2 NBA players that I have met in person.
There you go.
Yeah, when I was about 13 or 14, I was staying in a hotel in Boston and had just come out of the pool, so I was kind of dripping wet a little bit in the elevator. And then a bunch of tall guys come in, and one of them is Jim Jackson. So
there you go.
Fun times, yeah. And I was an Ohio State fan as a kid, and big Jim Jackson fan. And so yeah, he's seeing this like geeky kid who's wet, like in awe of him. So I'm sure it's a memorable moment for him.
I'm sure he still remembers you today. We'll maybe have to reach out to Jim Jackson on Twitter and say, hey, do you remember a wet kid talking to you in a hotel
right.
elevator? Maybe he will. I mean you never know, you know?
Yeah. So I need to bring up something important here. I have discovered the existence of a player named Moreland Wiley.
Moreland Wiley, okay.
Yes, he's a point guard. He played for both the 93 and the 94 Mavericks, but he had, I guess it's 3 separate stints with the Mavericks. And in his, I was thinking it was 4, but it's actually only 3. So he was there as a rookie in '89. Then he plays a couple half seasons with the Magic, and then in the '92 season, 3 games with the Spurs, and then a few games with the Hawks. Returns to the Mavericks in '93. So he's got 1 stint in '89, another one in '93. And then briefly goes to the Heat in '94 before returning to the Mavericks again in '94. So he gets to enjoy 33 games of the '93 season, 12 games of the '94 season, and then finally he gets some fun times with the Mavericks with Jason Kidd when they finally get respectable in the '95 season, 38 games. So 3 stints with the Mavericks between '89 and '95. Got 2 separate stints with the Hawks as well. So that's
there you go. I briefly looked this man up, Moreland Wiley. It all worked out pretty well because after his career ended, he became a part of the Mavericks player development staff. So he was rewarded for his loyalty from 2000 to 2004. So that's a good little run. You're seeing the emergence of Michael Finley's turning into a star, Dirk Nowitzki's turning into a star, Steve Nash. They're doing well. Nice. So he got success. He felt Mavericks success, and Mavericks lifer there. But I can't imagine why after experiencing the early '90s Mavericks, why you would ever want a part of that team. But good for him. So he also became an assistant with Orlando for a few years as well. So congratulations.
Well, good for him. How nice.
Moreland Wiley. So
Moreland Wiley, absolutely.
From New Orleans, so he's probably having a great day today. So
yeah. Well, let's hope so. So next we have, and I'm sorry, this must be a misprint, but I'm seeing the 2012 Charlotte Bobcats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think what happened here is that Basketball Reference clearly has mistaken what month or what day it is. Because as of this recording, my calendar says February 16th, but they clearly think this is some sort of April Fool's joke or someone forgot to change something because, I'm not buying that there was the Hornet. Why were the Hornets called the Bobcats in 2012? That makes no sense. So
yeah, that seems
it's stupid.
The most ridiculous thing possibly. Yeah,
I don't know what's going on with Basketball Reference, but we'll at them. They follow us. They're fans of the show, so we'll have to let them know that they've made this egregious mistake. So
absolutely, yeah, huge fans of the show. Absolutely. So yes, this team. The Charlotte team, we'll just call them that. 7-59. This is a lockout season, so it's not a full season, thankfully. But they did earn the worst winning percentage in NBA history, a .106. Yeah, and this is another one. It's a little bit like puzzling why they were so bad. I mean, they were 34-48 the year before. They had a good coach in Paul Silas, obviously toward the end of his career. And, they had some solid players like Joe Henderson, perfectly fine. DJ Augustin, perfectly fine. Now, they lost some key guys like Steven Jackson, Sean Livingston, and Beno Udrih. They traded them for they sent them away, and they also traded the draft rights to Tobias Harris for Corey Maggette. Now, Corey Maggette, 32, okay player, drew a lot of fouls, but didn't really do a whole lot else. They'd lost guys like, Kwame Brown, Dante Cunningham, Joel Persbilla. They did lose Boris Diaw for like half the year due to commitments in Europe, and when he did play, he was definitely he did eat a few baguettes when he was in France.
Yeah, he was at that point it was 75% wine and baguettes. So when he came back, he was a large fella. But
right, yes.
Yeah. It's fair.
Yeah, I mean they had a rookie Kemba Walker, so yeah, this does not. I mean, this definitely doesn't seem like a good team, but it doesn't necessarily seem like a team that would set the worst winning percentage in NBA history. And yeah, again, the next team they'd be fine. They were 21-61, bad obviously, but not like bad, historically bad. So a little weird. I guess they had no back-to-back wins during the season, which with 7 wins, that's unlikely. Their best player, theoretically, was someone named Derek Brown, who led the team in win shares with 2.3, only had 8.1 points per game, came off the bench, which probably is not a great sign. And I believe this was the end for Derek Brown in his NBA career. So began and ended his career with the Charlotte team with a little bit of a sojourn to the Knicks. So. Gerald Henderson, Corey Maggette both had 15 points per game. Gerald Henderson leading the team in points per game. And then leading the team in rebounds per game, Bismack Biyombo, I believe a rookie that year, 5.8 rebounds per game, which seems very low for leading a team. That has to be near a historical low, at least in modern NBA. So, yeah, just they were not good. They did not do anything well. Yeah, which you would kind of expect for a team that this bad to occur. So yes.
Yeah, it's strange because we talk about teams with guys on them. Like there's a lot of guys on this team. There's a lot of like legit NBA players, guys that were not necessarily in their prime, but all like a lot of really really good role players. But that's maybe the issue is it was a team full of dudes that were just role players and guys that were just nobody was really ready to be the top guy on this team. And yeah, it's strange because there's like really good players, but they just don't do anything. They don't score. They don't rebound. They don't win. It's one of the more perplexing teams in NBA history for me. It's just there's no reason this team should have been as bad as they were, and they just were. They were historically bad, and they probably should not have been. So I don't know. It's very strange. Well, on the topic of historically bad, let's get to the 1971 Cleveland Cavaliers, and they have a reason to be bad. They have a reason to be 15-67. They have a reason to have a negative 12.04 SRS because they were an expansion team at this time. The team, like most expansion teams, struggled out of the gates. They weren't really truly competitive until about 1975. Then, of course, they break through and make the miracle run to the Eastern Conference Finals in 1976. At this team, though, they were 3-37 on Christmas Day. That is not very good. They rallied late, though, 3-37 on Christmas Day, but they got all the way to 15 wins. So Bill Fitch really had these guys with their eyes on the prize here with the Cavaliers. Expansion team under the ownership of Nick Milletti is the initial owner of the team. Jerry Tomko, who, we're speaking of balls here, the father of future Major League Baseball pitcher Brett Tomko, was the man who submitted the winning entry to name the team the Cavaliers. There was a contest going on sponsored by the Cleveland Plain Dealer, and the Cavaliers won. Supporters preferred this to a few other names here. The Jays was one. The Cleveland Cavaliers could have been named the Jays, which I think would have been a pretty cool name because in the 90s they would have definitely made it the Jays was like jumpers, and it would have had a really stupid logo with like a ball going through a net and doing weird stuff because there wasn't only 27 different logos with nets and balls moving in them in the 90s. But the Cleveland Jays as a potential. The Cleveland Foresters, which is a pretty terrible name, and I'm glad that one didn't win. Then the potential was the Cleveland Presidents as well. We've talked about a few times as well that Cleveland has a large amount of presidents that came from the area and from the region. So that would have been or Ohio in general.
Ohio, not just Cleveland.
Maybe not Cleveland itself, but Ohio having a large percentage of presidents, which there's no doubt in my mind that obviously this is 1971. The Cavaliers come in to the mix. No doubt in my mind that in 1976, if this is an expansion team, they're the Cleveland Presidents for sure. That's when like Americana was just exploding, bicentennial and the flags everywhere. No doubt they would have been the Cleveland Presidents in 1976. But I like the Cavaliers. Cavaliers are a good name, and they've stood the test of time as well. So I prefer that. Definitely over the Foresters. That would have been really, really bad. So
as a Jay, I wouldn't necessarily have minded the Jays, but yeah, I hear you. I think Cavaliers probably ends up being the best decision. one thing to note is, not only were they an expansion team, they were one of 3 expansion teams. So like the pickings are really slim.
Yeah.
And you're also, this is also during the era in which a lot of talent's going to the ABA. So the pickings are really, you're getting the lowest on the bench of the lowest on the bench kind of guy. So it's no surprise that some of these teams would have been really bad. I mean, hey, they were, after Christmas, they were, 12 and 30, which is a lot better. Exactly. So not great. Yeah. Like you said, Bill Fitch kind of leading this team. The top players, you got Walt Wesley, 4.1 win shares, 17.7 points per game, 8.7 rebounds per game. I think this is the year that he scored 50 points in a game. They also got John Johnson with 16.6 points per game, Bingo Smith, 15.2 points per game, and McCoy McLemore, 11.7 points per game, 8 rebounds per game. That's a mouthful right there.
McCoy McLemore.
Right.
Yeah.
McCoy McLemore, yes. So, some guys, obviously John Johnson would be really, he was a really valuable role player, played with the Blazers and of course, famously with the Sonics, kind of point forward pioneer, a couple of these guys, Bingo Smith would obviously be an important part of the Cavs teams later, that ended up being good and, reaching the conference finals and all that. I want to also note that George Mikan's son, Larry Mikan, played his one and only season in the NBA with this team. So
yeah, I saw that name on there, and I was just kind of like, oh, that's weird. Mikan, he's got the same name as George Mikan. I had no idea that it was actually his son, so that's cool. But obviously it wasn't great, lasting only the 1 year. But this team, it makes sense. This is one of these ones that it makes sense why they were bad, and you could see the building blocks, and like we said, future names there that would be have good runs with the Cavaliers or be a part of the team. But it's an expansion team in, like you said, the era of the ABA, and you're also one of 3 expansion teams. Like this team was going to be bad, and the idea getting to 15 wins is a minor miracle for this team as well, especially when you look at some of the numbers. But they played pretty well. It's just they were bad, so it's fine.
It happens. Being bad happens. That's what we're all about. So. Yes. Now we are going to look at some more of the thresholds we talked about. First, we're talking about guys who won MVP for losing teams. Only happened twice in NBA history. The first time it happened was the actual first year in which the MVP was awarded, the 1956 St. Louis Hawks. Bob Pettit, in his second season, the Hawks had. In their prior season, Milwaukee had been 26 and 46. Pettit averaged 25 points per game, 16.2 rebounds per game, 27.3 PER, and 13.8 win shares. Not really much here in terms of supporting cast. He would get Cliff Hagan the next year. That would improve the team as well. They kind of had a big makeover before they started to go to the finals there. Some older guys like Jack Coleman and Bob Harrison and Chuck Sherrill were names, but not really big contributors there. And Alex Hannum, who obviously become famous as a coach on the team, but not a thick roster there. And even though he's MVP, obviously Pettit would continue to round into form and you become an even greater player. And then next we have the 1976 Los Angeles Lakers. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar winning the MVP for a 40 and 42 Lakers team. Of course, they gave up a lot to get Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, a couple of really young draftees and young players, and some other key guys. So the cupboard was definitely bare here. They had improved by 30 games from the prior season. I just want to go through this, the stat line here for Kareem this season, because it's pretty impressive, even for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So 27.7 points per game, 16.9 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game, 1.5 steals per game, and 4.1 blocks per game. The rebound, steals, and blocks all career highs for Kareem. So that that's some pretty good numbers.
That is not bad. Yeah, that's affecting the game in literally every way possible. I mean, scoring, rebounding, assisting, blocking. I mean, that's an all-time year, and it's pretty amazing that given all that they still 40 and 42, just almost a classic Wilt year more so than a Kareem year there with the Lakers.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you even look at advanced, like he was the 28th all-time value over replacement player season, not 9.0,
right.
17 win shares, 27.2 PR, just smack. But yeah, I mean, you basically have, you have old Gail Goodrich, and then you've got, old Cazzie Russell and old Donnie Freeman and, Kermit Washington there, but he's not, really anything yet. They just didn't have a whole lot there. But yeah, I mean, it would turn around pretty much the next season. I mean, the late 70s for the Lakers with Kareem, actually, those were pretty good teams. I mean, they made the conference finals the next year. They were like mid 40s to high 40 win teams, even before Magic came along. I mean, they obviously, weren't championship quality team outside of, perhaps in 77 had they not, been swept by the Blazers. But they, I think they were, on the cusp before Magic got there, and then of course pushed them over the top. So, and then we want to also look at players with 16 or more win shares in a season. Only 34 players in the NBA or the ABA have ever done that. First, we want to talk about Wilt Chamberlain on the 1963 Warriors. They went 31-49. So Wilt for this team averages 44.8 points per game, second most in NBA history to only his 50th season. 31.82 PER, also second all-time in NBA history, and it was the first all-time in NBA history until Giannis broke it last season, which I didn't really know until I had looked that up. Also had 20.9 win shares, which is 11th in NBA history. So that is a pretty wow season for Wilt. Their first year in San Francisco, after having moved from Philadelphia, and kind of an odd, another one of those seasons is kind of inexplicable why they were this bad with, a fairly good roster.
Yeah, and you look. I mean, obviously, Wilt Chamberlain scoring 44 a game and doing all that. I mean, this may have been definitely one of those situations where you look at and maybe it's like he was doing a little too much, but it's like Jesus, it's hard to believe though because like he's got 44 and 24. Like what the hell? Like it's just unbelievable that they're as bad as they were. But like you said, there are a lot of really good. I mean, Tom Gola's on there, Al Addles is on there. Just a bunch of Tom Masheri is there. Guy Rogers is there. I mean, there's a lot of really good talent on this team. It just doesn't all kind of work for some reason. But it is pretty amazing that Will could be that good and the Warriors could be that bad. Which 31 wins for a team. When you have literally one of the best seasons of all time, on your team. That's just it's hard to believe.
Yeah, for sure. And then Neil Johnson. We've talked about Neil Johnson before. Old Hoss, probably the second best center of the Mikan era. So the 1953 Warriors, the team goes 12-57. He has 15.3 win shares. He has more win shares than the team had wins. Now, I know that win share is not like a perfect stat, but that one is a little bit tricky to fathom.
Yeah, that's a hard one. Again, you said not perfect, but you feel like you should just luck into, having as many wins as your top players win share. So the other guys must have been that horrendous on the team to negatively affect them as bad as they did. But that's an all-timer right there.
Yes, and then the 54 Warriors, they improved to 29-43. He has 18.3 win shares, which is 32nd all-time. The next year, the 55 Warriors, they're 33-39. Paul Arizin comes back after 2 years in the military, so the team's better, 15.4 win shares. Again, another incredibly stout season in terms of those numbers. 1956, they add Tom Gola and they win the NBA title. Johnson only has 13.9 win shares, so finally gets a little bit more guys to carry the load there. But found that run pretty remarkable for having so many win shares and having that pretty bad team success there.
Yeah.
A couple other guys real quick hit this threshold. Alex Groza probably would have been the other candidate to be the second best center of the Mikan era if he hadn't been caught up in a gambling scandal that cut short his career. But he had 18 win shares for the 1951 Indianapolis Olympians, who were 31-37. Oscar Robertson for the 67 Royals that only won 39 games. He had 17.4 win shares, also averaged 30.5 points per game, 10.7 assists per game, and only 6.2 rebounds per game. By then, he was playing with Jerry Lucas, who was famous for stealing rebounds. And then Walt Bellamy, who we mentioned before with the 62 Packers, in addition to the other stout stats, also had 16.3 win shares for a 18-win team.
Yeah. Man.
Yes. So now we go to I know one of your favorite teams.
Oh yes, the 1998 Denver Nuggets, 11-71, negative 11.74 SRS. This is the year before Mike D'Antoni takes over, but don't worry, it doesn't get any better when Mike D'Antoni takes over.
Well, a little better, but not much better.
Slightly better, yes, but not. Things are not great in Denver land here. But this year he was just the director of player personnel, which is very strange. That he returned to the NBA and immediately became like a GM or similar to the not dissimilar to Greg Popovich, kind of the same path as well. But this was years. Bill Hanslick is our head coach of the 1998 Denver Nuggets. Years as an NBA assistant, finally gets his opportunity. It's this team. He lasts 1 year. He never coaches in the NBA ever again. I don't know what he did after this, but he was like, you know what? I'm gonna fish. Fishing sounds much better than coaching in the NBA ever again. The Nuggets second to last in offensive rating this year. So hey, something to hang their hat on. Dead last in defensive rating though. They're a terrible defensive team. Yeah. So not very good offensively either. But hey, not dead last. And what's strange about this is this is the first period of real struggles for the Nuggets franchise, who they made the playoffs every year that they existed in ABA history, in all but 2 years in 1980 and 1981 as they entered the Doug Moe era. As well, the Doug Moe era was obviously fun and successful for the franchise, and the drop off is pretty immediate for this team. They win 43 games in Doug Moe's final year as coach. Then they fall to just 20 wins in 1991 under Paul Westhead, their new coach. A brief blip of relevance there in 1994 and 1995, including the team's famous upset of the Sonics in 1994. Then things get real bad and stay bad. And the nadir is probably this season in 1998 as well. Over the last few years, most of the good players on the team are sent away. Antonio McDyess is sent away, then comes back, and then sent away again. Dale Ellis, Dikembe Mutombo, many other guys as well. And it probably does not help as well that if you look and you're aware of kind of the business of basketball at this time, is that the Nuggets are actively looking to be sold. They're looking for a buyer and stripping it down to its core and making it basically unwatchable. It makes it easier to sell, and it also makes it easier to potentially relocate as well, because that was a big potential at this time. They were going to relocate the Nuggets to another town. That obviously does not happen. They stay in Denver. They're obviously still in Denver right now, and they'd get better. Take a few more years, probably the Carmelo years it would take, but they're there now, and they've been consistently pretty solid since the Carmelo age as well. But let's get back to this terrible team first. Their best player is Anthony Goldwire, who leads the team in win shares at 3. Sure. That's not good. Johnny Newman, he's really old at this time. He's second with 2.7. It's probably not good. Eric Williams, he leads the team with 19.8 points per game. He only plays 4 games though, so we really can't count him. I guess Johnny Newman, 34 years old, scores 14.7 points per game to lead the team. That's not good. Lafonzo Ellis, he scores 14.3 points per game, 7.2 rebounds per game. That's not good either. It's a really bad roster. This is like an all-time, just horrendous roster here under with the Denver Nuggets. I mean, it is. We talk about guys. There's definitely a lack of guys on this team. There are guys, but most of them are either bad or just really, really young as well. They were a very young team. Like Bobby Jackson is on the team, and obviously he'd carve out a pretty good career. Danny Fortson's on the team. He'd carve out a pretty decent career. Tony Battie, also pretty good career. But then there's like Priest Lauderdale and something named Kwame Garris and Joe Wolf and a bunch of other dudes. Anthony Goldwire, who we mentioned as well.
Nuggets found themselves some Goldwire, I guess.
Yeah, Bryant Stith, the Bryant Stith era. Who could forget?
Right, who could forget the Bryant Stith era? Absolutely. Yeah. I'm fascinated by 34-year-old Johnny Newman, like leading the
right. And like,
boy. Yeah,
Johnny Newman's like a fine player, but like, he's like a career like decent, solid bench guy. And here in the end of his career, they're like, I don't know, man, just shoot the ball all the time. Who cares?
Just lead the team. That's fine. Yeah. Yeah, I had you're looking at the Nuggets franchise history. I forgot that that Dan Issel 2 stints as coach for the team in the early 90s and in the early 2000s. And yeah, most of that didn't go super well.
No,
but,
no, it did not.
Yeah.
So better player than coach, it appears.
Yeah, most definitely, yes.
I think not a hot take to say, that his playing career slightly better than his coaching career. So
yeah, slightly better. So yeah, now we get to, I think commonly thought of as the worst team in NBA history. Still is a strong, candidacy for that. The 1973 Philadelphia 76ers, 9-73, negative 11.5 SRS. And, they had such a steep drop off from just a couple, 3-4 years earlier. Just 2 years ago, they'd made the East Conference semis at 47 wins. Just a few years before then, they're, winning 60 plus wins, have an NBA championship. Only player from that era left basically is Hal Greer. They lost Jack Ramsey, who had been the general manager for the team in the offseason, went to Buffalo. Honestly, Jack Ramsey didn't always do the best job as a executive. He was a much better coach, so maybe that wasn't necessarily negative. But yes, the Sixers ownership decides, well, you know what, I am going to either offer the head coaching job to Marquette head coach Al McGuire, or maybe I will try to get Adolph Rupp out of retirement from the University of Kentucky. He was 70 years old at the time.
He was very old. Yeah.
Right.
If you're wondering, if you're doing the math in your head, and you're thinking, man, Rupp had to be pretty old. Yeah, he was very old. He was 70, which is a bold decision to take Adolph Rupp from who only knew college basketball for years and years and years and years, and slap him into the NBA at the age of 70 would have been. But hey, John Beilein got hired by the Cavaliers, so anything is possible, I guess. So.
Right. Oh, yeah, exactly.
Let's not. Oh God.
So yeah. Slight correction. I do want to mention. Yeah. So Ramsey had been an executive, but he did coach the Sixers since the '69 season, and then eventually Don Desjardins took over as the coach. And yeah, Don Desjardins' record not super great. They would replace him fairly soon. So yes, and as mentioned, he left to coach the Buffalo Braves. Billy Cunningham, he had left to join the ABA, and then this was a shamble of a team. They had a lot of guys, and some guys who had once been good players. Bill Bridges was on the team, but he was 33. Kevin Lockery is on the team, but he was 32. As mentioned, Hal Greer is 36. He's breaking records for age in the NBA. They have 19 guys on the roster, so they're flipping through guys. But they would start the year 0-15. Later, they would lose 20 consecutive games. Their coach was Roy Rubin, who had been the LIU head coach for many years and just had the team in complete disarray. Dave Wohl called Rubin a con man. The players just thought like he, gave them cliches, didn't have anything insightful to say in timeouts, was kind of a screamer. There was a book written about this team, Perfectly Awful. I can't 100% recommend the book because I think it definitely needed some better editing, but it does have some good stories about this team and just how, awful things, kind of went. By the time the team was 4-47, Rubin was let go, and then Kevin Lockery, ends up becoming player coach there. And they went 5-26 the rest of the way. So, at least an improvement, still not great, but yeah, in February, they kind of randomly won 5 of 7 games, and 3 of those 5 wins actually came against teams that would win 50 or more games that year, the Bullets, the Bucks, and the Knicks. During that streak, they doubled their winning percentage. Looked like they had righted the ship, but then they lost their last 13 games, so, kind of fell off there. Best player, we talked about him in the last episode, actually, Fred Carter, 20 points per game, 6 rebounds per game, definitely the one player who had a pretty solid season. John Block actually led the team in win share, 17.9 rebounds, or excuse me, 17.9 points per game, 9.2 rebounds per game. And then Tom Van Arsdale at 17.7 points per game. Hal Greer, unfortunately, 5.6 points per game, shot under 40% from the field. This was his last season. There's a anecdote from that Perfectly Awful book where, it's the last game of the season. The fans are looking for Hal Greer to, come off the bench and play one more game. He only played 38 games that season. I think he'd been inactive for the last 20 games. And Greer was just kind of like, man, I'm not in shape for this. I don't want to go out there. And then he doesn't go out there. It's just kind of like one of those, just a perfect anecdote for a incredibly horrible season and a bad way, unfortunately, for Greer to end his career.
Definitely. Let's move on now to the 1950 Denver Nuggets. Yes, we're going back to the Nuggets, but not the same Nuggets here. We'll talk about it here in a bit. 11-51, negative 11.31 SRS. Again, this doesn't seem entirely fair because this is the one and only year of the original Denver Nuggets. This team has no relationship whatsoever to today's Denver Nuggets. They were essentially not even a professional team. They were a longtime AAU team. They had many different names, the Denver Safeway Pigs. Then they were the Denver Nuggets. Then they decided, now we're going to change it again. Denver American Legion. Then they became the Denver Ambrose Jellymakers, which I want the current Denver Nuggets to have retro night where they are re-christen themselves the Denver Ambrose Jellymakers, because that sounds awesome. That sounds fit. Just to see Nikola Jokic in a jersey that says Ambrose Jellymakers. I mean, let's be honest.
That sounds great.
Especially, given his shape and
sure.
Body type, and oh man, just Jokic the Jelly Maker. I mean, that's just the memes would be never ending. But I'll try to see if I can run that up the ladder to the Denver Nuggets management and see what we can do there. Then they decided, we'll go with the Nuggets again. So they decided to become the Nuggets one more time. This team turned pro in 1948, immediately joined the NBL. They were terrible in the NBL as well, so it's not like they just joined the NBA and, oh my God, we're overwhelmed. No, they were really bad in the NBL as well. They've joined the new NBA, and they're still terrible there. And they joined numerous other teams, including the Anderson Packers, the Chicago Stags, the Sheboygan Redskins, the St. Louis Bombers, the Washington Capitals, and the Waterloo Hawks as teams that go, you know what, maybe the NBA is maybe a little too big for us. Again, another Chicago team that didn't quite make it, but then also, teams in Sheboygan and Anderson and Waterloo and stuff that's like, you guys probably don't, you guys probably should not be in the NBA. The NBA is a little bit maybe too big for you guys. And the Denver Nuggets were another one of those teams, but they would then become the Denver Refiners, which is a solid name. I do like that one as well. And the newly formed NPBL, which is basically a new professional league with a lot of these former NBA teams, and it lasted only a year, so you could tell it didn't go very well. And the team barely made it for the entire year as well. They at one point became the Evansville Goggins. They decided the Denver Refiners, we're going to move to Evansville, Indiana, and become the Goggins for the last 6 games of that season. And then they just went away forever. But their best player, someone we mentioned in our last episode, Kenny Sailors, jump shot pioneer Kenny Sailors. He averages 17.3 points per game and shoots a very respectable, at that point, 35%. From the field. Other notable Denver Nuggets, Dillard Crocker, 13.6 points per game. Not enough players named Dillard in today's NBA, if you ask me. He would end up playing for both Indianapolis and Milwaukee in the NBA. Bob Brown, last season of pro ball, he scores 11.7 points per game. And then Dwayne Clue or whatever, he would spend one more year with the Fort Wayne Pistons after the Nuggets folded. But that is your Denver Nuggets, not that Denver Nuggets, but your 1950 Denver Nuggets. Your former Denver Ambrose Jellymakers.
Absolutely. So a couple of important things. And excellent summary, by the way. One, I believe that the song Davy Crockett actually was originally about Dillard Crocker. They changed it to make it more marketable too. And second, I want to talk a little bit more about the Evansville Goggins, because this obviously fascinates me. So I had not heard about the Evansville Goggins, until you discovered this. But so apparently, and I'm getting this from Wikipedia, they were owned by Bill Butterfield, an office supply manager in Evansville. He bought the franchise, moved to Indiana. This is January 1951. America is ready. They're going to go agog over this new NPBL team. And that's where the name comes from. Everyone's excited and about Agog, about this team, and then he gives them the Goggins name, which I think it's a great name. I think there should be the next NBA expansion team that's not the Sonics should be the Goggins.
Yes, and honestly, the Sonics should maybe consider the Goggins as well. Like Seattle wants the Sonics back. I get it. Bring back our Sonics and stuff, but at least consider a Goggins before you make the final decision for the Sonics. I'm not saying that they have to be the Goggins, but at least maybe have a fan vote on it. At least, ask the people if they're agog for the Agogans or the Sonics. So
sure. So the Agogans apparently were coached by Gene Latham. They featured former local high school athletes, including Butterfield's son Bill, which is always good. Bill Jr., I guess. They did have a few foreign players with pro experience, including Blackie Towery. Unfortunately, Evansville lost all 6 of its games, as I believe you mentioned, but they did manage a win over the Harlem Globetrotters. So we'll see how legitimate that one was. But and under the notable alumni section here, we have no links to them, but we have named Norm McCool and Ali Shoaf. So I don't know anything about either gentleman, and I don't think it even behooves me to Google them, because I think whatever I would have in my imagination has to be better than whatever they actually are.
Yeah, so, Norm McCool had to just be an absolute badass, though, right? Like
McCool.
You gotta rule if your name's Norm McCool. So that is the Evansville Agogans. Yeah, at some point, you and I. I'm looking at the map here. It looks like it's right in between you and I, I think about 5-hour drives for both of us.
Okay.
Let's meet in Evansville one time, get some boots on the ground, and ask the fine folks of Evansville, Indiana, if they what their memories of the Agogans were, and if they're still agog for the Agogans, which I imagine they are. without getting there yet, I am sure that the indelible mark that the Agogans have left on Evansville, Indiana, can still be felt today. I'm positive of it.
Yeah, we're going to meet at the downtown Evansville YMCA, which is where the Agogans played their games. And and then we'll start from there. We'll figure it out.
Right. Well, we'll ask the oldest men we could find there. And then, I don't know, walk around the streets after that and figure out what we can do.
Hope they don't say anything racist and then, go on from there. So, right. All right. A few more fun with stats. So looking at PER and value over replacement. So, looking at 29 plus PER. We already talked about him. Wilt Chamberlain, 1963 Warriors, 31-49. We already talked about, kind of what that number meant. Another player very recently accomplished this feat. Anthony Davis with a 30.3 PER for the 2019 Pelicans, who were 33-49 overall. So only played 56 games in the season. Some of it was because of injury, but a lot of it was because this is a season in which he requested and or demanded a trade to the Lakers. And then, he played for a little while, and then everyone involved decided, like, hey, maybe better idea if you just don't play. So they were 25-31 in games in which he did play. So obviously much, much better under those circumstances. But yes, sort of an interesting statistical anomaly for Anthony Davis. Those are the only 2 teams that really, were led by a strong PER that, had a under 500 record. Mm-hmm. So looking at value over replacement player, you cannot, other than Kareem, who we mentioned above, you can't really see anybody who's like in the top 50 in VORP who had a losing record. The closest players that we would mention here, Dwayne Wade, who had the 17th all-time VORP for the 2009 Heat, who were 43-39. Tracy McGrady for the 2003 Magic, 22nd all time. They were 42-40. Of course, it's the year before the 2004 season where they just went to the tank. Kevin Garnett and LeBron James, both in 2005, both with 9.09 VORP. I think Garnett's was slightly better based on percentage, 25th all time. And both those teams, they had 44 and 42 wins respectively, and neither team made the playoffs. That was, of course, LeBron's second season. So yes, it is almost impossible to have a really good VORP and play for a bad team, which I guess means the stats doing what it says it does.
Absolutely. Definitely. A few more bad teams here and some good players here. 1989 Miami Heat, very similar to our Cavaliers we talked about here. Inaugural season for the Miami Heat. They go 15-67, negative 11.31 SRS. The maiden voyage for the NBA in Florida as well. Obviously, the ABA has the Floridians, but the NBA had stayed away through its entire history. But finally, they jump in here. This is a group led by former Sixers Billy Cunningham, agent Louis Chaffel, I believe, is the name there, with the guys that got together and kind of got this team together. They received funding from Carnival Cruise Line founder Ted Arison, and they made a bid to enter the NBA. And the NBA, there's some tension here because Miami and Orlando both wanted franchises. A few other teams wanted franchises, so the NBA said, you know what? Let's all come on board. So 4 different teams are going to come on board here. 1989 is going to have the Miami Heat and the Charlotte Hornets enter the league, and then the following year, the Minnesota Timberwolves and Orlando Magic are going to come into the league. And like most expansion franchises, it's kind of a ragtag collection of veterans and cast-offs in Miami, and they struggle. They're not too great. Rory Sparrow makes the first basket in Heat history. Anytime we can mention Rory Sparrow, we like to do so. Unfortunately, they lost an NBA record 17 games to start their inaugural season, so not great. Finally, though, they get their first win December 14th. They beat the Los Angeles Clippers 89-88. And a fun fact about the Clippers, who we are going to talk about here in a bit, because don't worry, no list of bad teams is complete without not one, but 2 Clippers teams. The Clippers this year, though, would provide both the Hornets and the Heat with their first NBA victory. So congratulations to the Los Angeles Clippers for helping both expansion franchises get victories. The team, this Miami Heat team, was dead last in offensive rating, but actually were not terrible in defensive rating. They finished 18th out of 25. Still bad, but not all-time bad. Best player on the team, or best players, there's a few. I don't know if there's one in particular. Kevin Edwards, 13.8 points per game for him. Rory Sparrow, the aforementioned Rory Sparrow, 12.5 points per game, 5.4 assists per game for Rory Sparrow. Grant Long, who, if you listen to our Heat Celtics episode that we did a few months ago, he was led the team in win shares at 4.6, also at 11.9 points per game and 6.7 rebounds per game. And then the future DJ, then rookie Ronnie Cycli, 10.9 points per game and 7 rebounds per game for him as well. And the Heat would get pretty good after. It wouldn't take very long for the Heat to be competitive, but obviously not this year and not for the next few years.
So going back, of course, to the Clippers, who were bad in that 1989 season, but they were even worse at times, including the 1987 season. And of course, as you know, Rich, the Clippers generally have been one of the worst franchises in NBA history for most of their history. The last decade, it's been quite a bit better, so not quite as terrible. The misery has come more in the underachieving in the playoffs, which is a better kind of misery than, hey, I'm winning 12 games a season type of misery. But yes, anyway, so they by 1987 they had not made the playoffs in 11 seasons, back when they were still in Buffalo. But this is the worst win percentage and lowest win total in their franchise history, worst SRS. They were 12-70 in 1987 with a negative 11 SRS. Looking at their best players, you could look at future NBA head coach Mike Woodson, 17.1 points per game. They also had Marcus Johnson, but he only played 10 games because of what ended up pretty much being a career-ending injury. He had 16.6 points per game. Michael Cage, 15.7 points per game. He also had 11.5 rebounds per game. And in fact, he had 7.2 win shares, which in the more modern era, we talked about, a guy like Johnston in the 50s, but, the stats there are kind of incomplete. It's more of an estimate there. So, of any of these teams that are in more recent eras, 7.2 win shares for a 12-win team is absolutely incredible. That's a really, standout stat there. And yeah, he was definitely a little bit better than we remember in this era. And of course, the Clippers were like, oh yeah, we've got this one really good player in this, terrible team. Let's just go ahead and trade him for Gary Grant and a first round.
Of course. Yeah. The Clippers, the idea of having a good player, and especially in this era of Clippers history, is just too much for them to handle. So they immediately got rid of him as quickly as they possibly could.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, he's going to want to get paid money. I mean, why would we want to keep him if he's going to get paid money?
Get out of here, dude.
That'd be ridiculous. Yeah, dude. Yeah. And then, another of one of the other most terrible teams, the 2000 team, 15-67, negative 10.73 SRS. Chris Ford is the coach, and then you get Jim Todd in there. Jim Todd was 4-33 overall, so not so good there. Elgin Baylor's still the general manager there. And they this was their 30th season overall as a franchise, 16th in LA. They had missed the playoffs in all but 4 of the past 25 years, had not gotten out of the first round at 76. They a couple big things that happened before the season. One, they had moved to the Staples Center, which probably a better arena situation for them, but unfortunately their on, they have the co-tenant with the Lakers, who of course are, have a championship roster and are,
Right.
dominating the city. It lays their inadequacies even more bare. And then, they'd gotten Derek Anderson in the offseason, who was in his second season, kind of maybe at the time you thought maybe he could be a star there, but yeah, going to the Clippers is not really a good situation for most to become a star. He does lead the team in 3.3 win shares. Rookie Lamar Odom is second with 3.2. Odom also has 16.6 points per game, 7.8 rebounds per game, 4.2 assists. The team was second to last in the league in offensive rating, dead last in defensive rating. They actually outplayed their expected win-loss percentage by 2 games. So, they're trying hard up there. They're, they definitely want to do their best for Jim Todd.
I should note as well, for people that don't remember, with Derek Anderson, whether Derek Anderson was a franchise changing player or whatever, he obviously was not. They just let him go in free agency after this year as well.
Of course.
It's just perfect. It's so Clippers to say, we got a young star. Just let him go. Whatever. He's go away.
Yeah.
Just perfect Clippers. Just my God, what a team.
It's good stuff. Yeah. So so the key player, the number one overall draft pick that they'd gotten, a year or two before, Michael Olakandi, and it doesn't go well. They hire assistant coach Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, his one and only season as a assistant. At least one key aspect of that is to try to turn Olakandi into a real genuine NBA player. And this was his second season. 9.8 points per game, 8.2 rebounds per game, 43% field goal percentage. And, not really his fault that he's awful. He came from, a situation in which he was, there's no way that he should have been a number one overall pick. It was just completely misjudgment on everybody's part. He was dominant. Yeah, he was dominant, but it was at, University of the Pacific. He just was not in a situation where he, had enough experience. I mean, he was doing what he did because he was, big and athletic, and he certainly tried hard. And he had a 9-year career, but he was just not in a position where he was going to be, anywhere near, a franchise-changing player.
No, he's learning how to play basketball while in the NBA with the expectations of being a number one overall pick, which is usually not very good. And on an all-time terrible franchise with an all-time terrible leadership structure in the Clippers, Kareem or not, it's just an absolute disaster for Olakandi, unfortunately. It's amazing that he did carve out a pretty decent-ish career. It ended up being okay, but obviously never should have been a number one overall pick. But that's not his fault. That's the Clippers' fault. So we'll go to our final team now here, the 2014 Philadelphia 76ers. The process years here, 19 and 63, negative 10.66 SRS, the 75th season in franchise history, one of their most pathetic as well. During the season, the 76ers are going to tie the Cavaliers record for most consecutive losses with 26. The team was not terrible 45 games into the season, 14 and 31, but fell off a cliff in the last 37, going 5 and 32 the rest of the way, which we'll talk about a bit why that happened. First true year of the process Sixers. The prior year, the dismantling slowly begins, but they're still an okay team at 34 and 48. After that year, Doug Collins is let go, and that's when the team just gets completely stripped down to the bare bones, where, in the offseason, Drew Holiday is traded. Also, Justin Holiday is waived because I guess when you don't have Drew, you don't need Justin anymore. Both of them ended up being pretty decent NBA players. They would have been good on a young team, but hey, that's the process Sixers. Surprisingly, though, this is not even the worst or the second worst win total during the process Sixers era, despite the terrible SRS, which I found pretty interesting, because they would win only 18 games in 2015 and then completely bottom out in 2016, going 10 and 72. I forgot how bad that year was, but interestingly enough, this year though stands out as the worst SRS year, which is a pretty fascinating. Best player on this team, Michael Carter-Williams. It seems like he'd be the best because he won the Rookie of the Year this year. As he was 6th on the team in win shares, but had 16.7 points per game, 6.2 rebounds per game, 6.3 assists per game. A few other good players. Top win share was Thaddeus Young at 3.5. win shares. He also averages 17.9 points per game. Evan Turner was on this team. He has a 17.4 points per game, also 6 rebounds per game, 3.7 assists per game. And there's a lot of talent on this team. Thad Young, Evan Turner, Michael Carter-Williams, Spencer Hawes, a few guys here. Things get real dark in the bottom half of the roster. They go through 23 different guys, a lot of G League dudes, a lot of guys coming up and down. And of course, not all these guys are going to end the year with the Sixers as well, which I kind of mentioned with the the Washington Wizards model here. If they want to follow at least somewhat of what the Sixers did, but the Sixers basically decided any of these players that were decent we were going to trade. So Spencer Hawes, he's traded in February for Earl Clark and a second-round pick, which turned into Jeremy Grant, who they decided they didn't need either, so they got rid of Jeremy Grant as well. Then Evan Turner is traded to Indiana for the then corpse of Danny Green, the 2014 corpse of Danny Green. So yeah, that's kind of why the team falls off a cliff, is that two or three of their best players are just immediately sent away for nothing. Just nothing.
And that was Danny Granger, not Danny Green, by the way.
Oh, I said Danny Green. I'm sorry. Danny Granger.
All right.
Yeah. Danny Green is only a corpse now, but he wasn't in 2014.
Well, yeah.
He's okay. He's still fine. But
he's actually right. I get what you're saying.
At that time, Danny Granger, who was no good, and that this is a team obviously did not want to really get good players or talented players. They wanted draft picks and losses, and that's what they got.
Sure. Right. Yeah. So, yeah. The Jrue Holiday trade is kind of fascinating in retrospect, because I mean, I get the idea. He's about to get expensive. He was an all-star, but he was kind of borderline type all-star, and maybe he's going to get expensive, so you want to get some assets for him. But yeah, what they ended up getting was Nerlens Noel. They got a first-round draft pick. I think that ended up getting flipped for Dario Saric. Now, you would much rather have what Jrue Holiday has done since 2013. In his career than anything that you had for those guys. And I know when you make these trades, you don't know that, but that seems like, a flaw in the whole process thinking, to a degree, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and that's I have a lot of issues with how the process has went down, and more issues, not necessarily with how the process went down, but how people react to the process. Like everything that Sam Hinkie did, which is perfect, and they're exactly where they need to be, and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, dude, they traded a 22-year-old guy that ended up carving out like a really good NBA career in Jrue Holiday, or 22 or 23 or 24, I forget where he was, somewhere in that range, who ended up carving out a really good NBA career. And that's one of the things that I always had an issue with the process Sixers, is that it like, they weren't trying to build play. They were just straight up like asset collecting and trying to lose, where I like my rebuilding teams to find and identify players that are going to get good and going to be good and kind of build and work around them. And the Sixers were not interested in that whatsoever. Whether Jrue Holiday would have been kind of the centerpiece of like a decent team, I don't think so. I think they probably would have still been pretty bad, even with Jrue Holiday, even if he is their top player on their team. But they just, it was one of many guys that they let go. And that's kind of the unfortunate, or the thing that people don't talk about is, I mentioned there, Jeremy Grant was, drafted by the team and just kind of let go for nothing. Tobias Harris at one point will be kind of go through there. Jrue Holiday will go through there. Justin Holiday, who ended up carving out a decent ish career. I mean, there's many, many guys that would go through, the Sixers pipeline and then just be casted off because they were trying to, collect assets and I don't know. Yeah, it's
and obviously, I mean, they got the assets they got for, they were able to get Embiid and Simmons. I mean, I guess on like the larger level, I guess it worked, but on like, it just seems like, I don't necessarily have an issue with the approach. It was more, I guess, a lot of the execution of that approach. And quite frankly, there was definitely a cult surrounding that for a while of just like, everything here is great. What are you talking about? Any criticism of it is like, you're just a dinosaur, doesn't understand the modern NBA or whatever. But
and they also drafted Nerlens Noel and Jahlil Okafor as well. So
I mean, Noel kind of made sense.
Sure.
He just didn't end up being as good. Yeah, Okafor made no sense at the time. But anyway, we digress. I think that is actually about all that. That's it.
A lot of bad teams, some good players, some fun along the way. We're agog about finally, for the first time ever, talking about this topic, and we'll never talk about it again. Hopefully,
right. The first time we talked about the best player on the worst teams. The first time that we've talked about testicles on this program.
A lot of firsts. A lot of firsts on this here episode.
Everyone, of course, you can find the podcast at if you go to the Step Back at fansided.com in the Fansided NBA section. There's all kinds of fantastic content there, and you can also we are on all of the podcast services. If you want to, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher or wherever you want to go. Take advantage of the promo code FANSIDED20 at manscaped.com for support us there as well. And you can find us on Twitter and Facebook at Over and Back NBA. So thanks again for listening, and we'll be back again soon.